face. Now I know Lewis. And if the pattern matches, I know. But if you're creating a future and you're not clear on that future and you want all these things, but you haven't addressed all those circuits and behaviors and emotions and chemicals of the past, you won't recognize the pattern. You'll walk right past the relationship. You'll never see it. So I think that there's the preparation for the relationship, the overcoming, and overcoming and overcoming and overcoming and overcoming and becoming.
Ooh.
All of a sudden now says, I am worthy. And the universe only gives us what we think we're worthy of receiving. So when you're worthy to receive, it's not going to be on Match.com when you're looking at body parts and whatever else. This is going to be like ka-ching.
An energy connection.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like that came out of nowhere, because when you're in survival, and you're in separation, and you're in lack, and you're forcing and controlling and trying to predict outcomes, you're matter trying to change matter. And of course, it's going to take time for this to happen, because you're creating in three-dimensional reality, and everything in three-dimensional reality takes time. Mm-hmm. But when you're creating from the heart, with a coherent brain and a coherent heart, and you got that 5G Wi-Fi signal, it's not like you go anywhere now. The experiences are coming to, you're drawing the event to you. So we spend a lot of time bonding with our future emotionally. I have colleagues of mine who look at our data on oxytocin, and they're like, listen, oxytocin levels go up during, in a relationship, the honeymoon stage of a relationship, and monogamy is created because of those chemicals, or a female mammal is bonding with her offspring. That's exactly right. I want our people, our students, to bond and fall in love with their future just like they do with somebody else. And when you're bonded to your future, no person, no circumstance, no thing is going to remove you from it. So then, if you fall from grace during the day, then the next question is, what person, what circumstance caused me to disconnect from my love in the future? And let me rehearse in my mind, if I have that same circumstance, how I'm going to overcome it. Open your eyes and be in the initiation of life and stay in that place and just know that your future is going to happen. So being able to activate the heart and breathe in there and get the body out of survival and start working with it like it feels safe enough to create. Once energy makes it here, you're going to get some really good ideas. Yeah. You're going to see things you never thought of seeing. You're going to feel things you never thought you'd feel. And the images that you're creating, what are they doing? The thoughts that you're creating, they're making more of those chemicals. And now you're feeling more of the feeling of your future before it happens. You're giving your body a sampling. A taste of the future before it's happened. Keep doing that enough times, and that feeling is going to become very familiar to you. There was a researcher out of Yale University that in the 1940s that was studying electromagnetic fields around living organisms. And in the 1940s at Yale University, nobody was doing this, and he was a vitalist. He wanted to understand the unseen fields around living organisms. So he started studying eggs. All kinds of eggs. Chicken eggs, swallow eggs, reptile eggs, snake eggs, salamander eggs, there's all kinds of eggs. And he was using a magnetometer, and what he found was, 100% of the time, no matter what egg he measured, the positive charge was always at the head, and the negative charge was always at the tail. Well, if you have positive charge on one end and negative charge on the other end, you got an external electromagnetic field called the magnetic field. That's a magnet, right? What happens with human beings is every thought has a frequency. Every thought produces a chemical. So if you keep obsessing about your lack of finances, your lack of time, your lack of energy, lack, and those thoughts.
I don't have this, I need this,
What are the chemicals you're feeding your body? You're taking thought. It's producing a frequency, and that frequency in the form of chemistry is storing that thought emotionally right in your second center. You feel guilty, you feel unhappy. The moment you feel unhappy, then you generate more thoughts equal to that feeling, which makes more chemicals, and you keep taking energy from the brain and storing it in the body. If you react to people in your life and you feel anger, frustration, whether it's traffic, the news, whatever it is,
parents,
whatever, you're drawing from this field, this electromagnetic field, you're tapping that resource, and you're making chemistry out of it, and the field shrinks. So now, By doing that and living in survival, the body no longer is a magnet. So now you have very little energy in the brain. In fact, 5% of the energy is in the brain, and 95% is stored in the body. Now the body's been conditioned emotionally. So a lot of energy in the body, very little in the brain.
Pursuit is very taxing. And the reason is, there's a biochemical reason for this, is it's like wandering in the desert not knowing if there's water at all. That's really depleting. I mean, epinephrine is in the brain, and its chemical equivalent in the body is adrenaline. Those are the same thing. And if you're constantly in pursuit, right, you're just pursuing external goals, external goals, it will wear your nervous system down. You will be exhausted, and one will eventually run aground. You'll become mentally depressed. The key is to figure out what are the rewards that you can acquire along the way internally. Remember, it's subjective. There can also be external rewards, because many things have milestones, a Series A or a Series B for a company, then the IPO right, later.
Reaching 1 million users or doing this,
We have engagements before we have weddings, typically, right?
Yeah.
There are those rare instances where people just go and get married, but typically there's a lot of buildup that is designed, that fortunately, provides these reward mechanisms. So the key thing is that you can't just be all gas pedal all the time without rewarding yourself. However, the reward, that dopamine, is so powerful because it actually, as I mentioned before, it actually is the chemical substrate for epinephrine. It creates a reservoir of more energy. And again, I'm not talking about caloric energy or glycogen.
Mind energy.
It's mental energy. It's the desire to push on. It's the desire to keep going. And
so
again,
we need some consistent dopamine hits throughout the days or our months,
right,
to give us more energy to pursue.
That's right.
But we don't want to be over pursued, because then we'll burn out.
That's right. And so everyone has to find where that sweet spot is, that kind of, on the freeway driving, where it's really smooth and seamless, where you're not on the accelerator the whole time, where you're in a gear that's appropriate. And, we're talking now in terms of sort of, neuroscience lens on these things, but the key is always going to be practices. It's going to be, just as earlier we're talking about bringing stress levels up or down, depending on, or alertness levels up or down, depending on the kind of stress you're experiencing. The reward system is great because let's say you're a person that can very easily access this dopamine reward. So you're always excited. People say, hey, let's do this. And your mantra is, let's go. And you just kind of go. What we call in science very low activation energy. You just go. That's great. Those people do run the risk of burnout. Although there are these people that we occasionally encounter that just seem to have boundless energy for everything, and they tend to get a lot more done because they have a lot more internal reward. And you'll notice they're getting rewards from all the little things, and it's 100% subjective. It's like hearing funny jokes all day long. You can just keep going. Incidentally, the beginning of relationships, when people fall in love, it's a real thing, but it is associated with a big flood of dopamine in the system. Makes everything seem exciting and possible and new. And I think that we also know other people that they have a very hard time accessing this dopamine system, and they either place it under the complete control of external things, so they're miserable until they get the payoff, and then sometimes they're even miserable then, or they really just they haven't learned the skills of how to access it.
So how do we trick our mind to find rewards in subjective things that aren't actually physically coming to us?
Okay, so I'll tell a brief anecdote about an experiment that's really important. This was done many years ago in a psychology department. I think it was done at Bing Nursery School at Stanford, but I could be wrong about that, so I don't want to state that as absolute fact. But the experiment nonetheless was done where they looked at kids in schools. These are kids about nursery school age or maybe a little bit older, and they looked at what they did during recess. And they found that some kids really like to draw. And so these kids would naturally just orient towards the crayons and pens and draw. And then for a short while, they rewarded the kids for drawing. Those same kids, they would give them a gold star or a little sticker or something that was special and made them feel special. So they were giving them an external reward. Then they removed the reward, and what they found is those kids drew at a much lower frequency. They somehow lost the intrinsic pleasure of drawing.
Because they were used to getting an extrinsic reward.
Suddenly, they associated the drawing. They thought they weren't conscious, but their nervous system said, "Oh, I guess I was doing it for the reward. Now there's less reward." And without going into a lot of details, there's a very solid scientific phenomenon called reward prediction error, which says that if you get less dopamine at the end than you anticipated, it's a letdown. If you get more at the end, then it feels great. Now, what this all translates to is, once again, learning how to attach internal rewards to the process of whatever it is that you want to do in order to get you to the thing you really want. And so the short answer in this, actually I was asked this recently, someone said, okay, how can I ensure that once I succeed, this was somebody who was doing very well in their pursuit of a goal, and they were getting close, and they said, how can I be sure that when I get to the win, that I don't lose the ability to keep working, because I really want this payoff.
I'm not satisfied.
Right, and I said, well, there's two ways. One is make sure that reward, really bask in it, really appreciate what you've done and what's come to you. But here's a very important but, take that feeling of being saturated with dopamine, the huge win, and attach it to the effort process that got you there.
So when you're thinking this took me 5 years to accomplish this thing, but reminding yourself of every day, week, year, all the little things you did on a daily basis to get you there. Not, we're here.
Right. That's right. If you think that you sort of, let's say Super Bowl win, the party at the end is going to be great, right? I have to imagine it's really going to be great. You
Champagne, you're this,
huge. But at that moment, people, the winners anyway, their system is flooded with dopamine. And there's an opportunity, because dopamine, we haven't talked about this, but dopamine is a signal to the brain that it should rewire so that in the future, it has a higher probability of getting back to that experience.
Oh, wow.
This is how animals learn how to find water and food. This is at the basis of so many reward pursuits. And so if you attach all that plasticity, all that brain rewiring to the celebration and only to the celebration, you actually can erase a lot of the valuable content that your brain, skills that your brain acquired en route to that goal.
So it's almost like that whole night after you celebrate, and maybe the next few days, really reflect on the years it took to get you there.
That's right. We tend to so overemphasize the wins. It's the things of movies, right? I mean, there's some movies that are really good, like Rocky, the first Rocky, where he didn't actually win, he loses. And it was, so many people, I think it won Academy Award for Best Picture, right? So many people associate that film with the striving process. The reward was really in the striving. Yeah. His joy at the end of that was really called to, it was interesting, he called it to his family, to the process, right? It was really a movie that captured that in its best form. When it's just about the win, what you lose this amazing opportunity to attach the dopamine to everything that came before it. Now, in addition to that, there's one other way to do it. Nobody likes this one, but it works, which is also, when you get there, give away the gold star. Give it away. And really...
So you don't fixate on the gold medal all the time.
And really high performers. There are a few people whose names, unfortunately, I can't mention, that I know who have done incredibly well in the Silicon Valley world. And some of them have given away a substantial portion of what they have. And everyone thought, oh, they want a simpler life and this and that. No, actually, they were just setting themselves up for the next big win. And they've gone on to do this 2 or 3 times now.
Really?
So they keep moving the carrot out in front of them, but they also are somehow intuitively understanding this process, that what got them there was not the last 1 yard into the end zone.
Was the 10 years of the journey.
It's necessary but not sufficient, right? But everything that came up until then is so important. So when we have dopamine in our system, and when we've taken control of that process, we want to make sure that we capture everything that led up to that. And it's vitally important in these big, we're talking in these big milestones type of examples. But this can be done across the day. It can be, I'm going to get to noon just really being the most reflective person I can with my child. And not just doing that as a sheer effort, like, I really don't want to do it, but doing it and thinking, this is going to be a lot of work. And when I get there, I'm going to take a couple minutes to just register everything that I managed to control, all the things I managed to not do that would have been destructive. And so dopamine turns out to be, I would argue, one of the most, if not the most powerful neurochemicals in our system. There's a great book called The Molecule of More. I didn't write it, I wish I had, that gets into this whole description, which is quite accurate, about how dopamine isn't just about reward at the end. It's really the molecule of motivation. It's what propels us forward. It's an incredible read, really. A lot of real world examples. Very accessible book. And it really points to how so much of what we're about is the pursuit of these external goals, but that if we can learn to control these things internally, that's when things become kind of limitless. You know, this word that everybody wants to access. Everyone wants to know, what's the pill that's going to make me limitless? What's the technology? We actually have the chemical inside us. The key is to learn to regulate it. And the subjective part, the example of good joke, bad joke, is the best example I can give, that you have to decide for you what lets you access that. And obviously those things should be things that are not destructive to you or to other people, because that will take you down a bad path. It also, we have to understand that dopamine can be attached to the trivial, anything. I could attach it to picking up and putting down this cap for my water bottle, but the point is that if that's not attached to some other thing, it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
So I know that this is a little bit less concrete than like 2 inhales and an exhale.
Right. I like this.
But this is the way I think, I'm certain, this is the way that the mind can be trained. We can train our mind to be in pursuit and in regular wins. And this is why I think there's a lot of interest these days in like habits and habit formation. Because when you move that horizon in close and you complete something small, it's not about what you completed, it's the fact that you completed. You're engaging a circuit. It could be making your
bed, it could be writing a page in your notebook.
It's like a little hatch flipped open, a little dopamine got deployed. It's like people who are like list crosser offers.
Yeah.
They're engaging this process. So I think what I'm describing again is not completely new. People will look to different examples of their life or other people's lives and say, oh, right, that's that. But that's exactly the point. I think that's the real utility of a discussion like about neuroscience like this, which is that once you understand the mechanisms, you can start asking yourself, where does this work for me? Where does it not work for me? And how can I maneuver this in healthy ways?
I'm curious, as we're getting to the beginning of the year, and a lot of people set goals for the year for themselves, or if they're ending a career, exiting a business, getting out of a relationship, they'll usually set some new type of goal for themselves. So whether it's the beginning of the year or you're just in transition and you want to set new goals, what do you think is, based on neuroscience, is the best way to set a year-long goal for yourself? Should we have 20 massive goals? Should it just be one big goal? Should we have 3 key goals? And how do we create the goal to where it drives us to perform at our optimal best and get closest to that goal, if not accomplish it? And what should we be thinking about throughout the year in order to accomplish the goal?
Yeah. Well, I can give an opinion on this, but it's just my opinion. I break up my life into these 12-week, I think it was because I've always done 12-week training cycles.
You're like an athlete, it's a season.
So 12-week training cycles. Just seems manageable somehow, with the understanding that there will be setbacks and things of that sort. I think that certain goals are goals of practices that we've already mastered. So, you're trying to next level what you've already accomplished. And so those goals are going to require a lot less limbic friction, if you will. And you already know how to access the rewards. You actually can predict the rewards and when they come. You actually know what the rewards are. You've really clearly defined them. Those are goals that I think we're sort of on autopilot with. And I think everyone should probably check in at the end of the year and say, if I'm going to continue along that trajectory, it might make sense for me to set some really concrete goals. Sometimes those are quarterly, financial quarters or academic quarters, if that's what the landscape they're in. But I think that that doesn't require a lot of us except more of the same, right? But those are nonetheless growth goals. And there's a little bit more friction there because it
Very challenging.
It takes more effort to lean in because when you don't already know how to do something, it's a very different goal pursuit, right? Sort of like
so if I already have my business and I've been running it for a few years, certain practices of how to get to where you've been.
That's right.
And you're thinking, how do I double my business?
That's right.
It's different than I'm trying to learn a whole new skill goal.
Right. You already know how to forage for water,
as
opposed to you're some young calf or some animal that needs to learn how to walk
to survive.
Go look for Right. So I think one big goal of the sort that we don't actually have the skill set yet, or we're not even aware of what we need in order to accomplish it per year seems like a pretty good goal to me. So learning an entirely new language or an entirely new physical skill. But with any long-term goal, the problem is,
don't focus on the destination.
That's right. Well, so you have to move the horizon in, but you have to remember there's that one little pitfall, that cul-de-sac that I described, where you'll tell people, this year I'm going to do blank, and if they reward you enough, you might not do it. Remember, if you get enough dopamine...
That's amazing. I'm so happy you're doing that.
That's
Congratulations.
Right. And you say, I know I can do it, and then you sort of lose the incentive to do it. So a lot's been made out of making goals public.
Is it better to make them public or not?
Well, so this is a question. I don't know. I think that in my case it has. For me, telling several people that I'm going to do something, because I will work very hard to avoid
humiliation,
the shame and disappointment.
Yeah.
But I tend to do that with things I really want to do anyway, but there's a strong fear element. Like I'm afraid to do this, or I'm kind of anxious about doing this. So I'll tell people, and then I'm like, okay, now I'm committed.
Yeah.
I got to do this.
You got to do it now.
And I tell people that I'm certain they're going to give me a hard time.
Yeah.
That's just my nature.
Right.
And I'm not trying to prove them wrong. I'm just trying to make sure that they don't have any ground to stand on.
Yeah.
And that's how I do it. I think for some people, the continuation of what they're already doing, if it's feeling like a lot of work, it's feeling exceedingly challenging, and they're like, oh my God, another year of this, another 5 years of that. I think that's when you have to move the horizon in really close. I think a lot of people right now are feeling back on their heels because 2020 was such a trying year for a lot of people. So many people are recalibrating what's possible. Although many people are feeling expansion and they're really going to go forward full steam. So I think continuing in pursuits that we already have some degree of mastery over, and thinking about where could I notch that up another 2 or 3%, I think that's incredibly valuable. I think that provides a lot of value to the individual, to their families, and to society, really. Because a 2% improvement of like what you're already doing is going to have an outsized effect on what other people receive, right? Even though for you, you've been down that road many times. But taking on a new pursuit in parallel to that means really getting excited about the possibility. You give the Jim Carrey example, about the possibility, and starting to imagine what that would actually be like to be, well, let's say fluent in Spanish, and you can just do this reflexively without having to try. That's totally within your reach. And I think there it makes sense to really think about the end point quite a lot as a way to get over those barriers of fear. Because when you already know how to do something, there's no fear barrier. Yeah. It's just an energy barrier.
Right.
Vibrational match to it. You have to be what you want, and then you can have it. In other words, you have to feel prosperity equivalent to your request. You got to get in the vortex. The vortex has to be familiar to you. And the thing that's so interesting about that is you tune yourself to the frequency of the vortex, and you're not saying, I want to win the jackpot. You're saying, money's flowing to me in abundance. It comes in as fast as it can go out. I have no need for money. Money is flowing in. It's like air. I breathe it in and I breathe it out, and I breathe it in and I breathe it out, and I breathe it in and I breathe it out. In and out, in and out, in and out. It just comes to me naturally, you see. You got to get into the vortex, and then the vortex gives you everything that you need to figure it out as you go. I believe that these dollars are there for me. I believe that there's a path to them that will be an easy path for me. I believe that the path is through the vortex. I believe the path is through my emotions. I believe the path is through the alignment with source energy that is really the larger part of me. I believe that my emotions tell me truly. I believe that when I'm frustrated, I'm not there. I believe that when I'm hopeful, I'm closer. I believe that when I'm happy, I'm there. I believe that when I appreciate, I'm there. I believe that when I make peace with what is, I'm there. I believe that when I appreciate the process of my life that caused me to put this solution there, that I'm there. I love every struggle that I've lived because that's been the fodder that put this there. I believe that the well-being that I've lived and the well-being that hasn't felt so much like well-being has put it there for me. I know that I'm the creator of my own reality. I know that these things are true. I know that I get to live the manifestational version of all of that. I believe believe that I can live the manifestational version of that. I think there's evidence all over this planet of people who stood right where I'm standing in terms of finances, who had a vortex just like I do that was all queued up for them, and they just found the way in. And I don't have to find the identical way in. I don't have to run around and look for people and say, how'd you get your money? How'd you get your money? How'd you get your money? Because it's different for every one of us. But one thing is a common denominator about anyone who has succeeded in anything that they have been reaching for. They found a way to be a vibrational match to what they were asking for. And
so in my 20s, the reason why I was successful was I was a little unique in so many different things. For example, when I was doing accounting consulting, I divided my clients to two groups. One, I do regular job. The other, I always bring something whenever I got to meet them, just a herb tea, Japanese tea, like a book, or just not super expensive. So in 6 months, I got so many referrals from the gift-giving groups. I didn't ask for any clients, right? But they gave me so many referrals. And the second, group, not so much. So I recommend everybody to start giving more, something a little extra, not like 30% more, but something to show your appreciation. And it doesn't really matter if you're a florist or cleaners or business lawyers or a dentist. If you start giving something, you get more. So this is the law, I think. If you give more, you receive more. And then there is one more extra reason to appreciate about. So your life would shift. So your whole energy would be so different and so content. And I think people want to do business with happier people. People don't want to go with people who are very depressed. So the people with the radiance of appreciation often attracts more people and more opportunities. So this is not a new age or a spiritual thing. It's a practice to appreciate more. So what you appreciate appreciates. And I think it's so simple. So start appreciating about money is the first step. And then second step is start appreciating what you have. And if you start sharing what you have, I call it gift. All of us have gifts. I've written probably like half of my books, 20 books on how to discover your gifts and monetize them. Because each of us is born with a special gift and something to be shared with this planet. And if you can find it, and if you can improve it, and you can polish it and just share with a society, I think that translates into money. So I wrote a national bestseller, Do What You Love and Make Sure Money Follows You. So it's very important.
You move towards, which is why it is so important to focus on what you want and do not focus on what you don't want. After all, if you were having an injection in your arm and you look at it and think about it, it's more painful than if you read a message on your phone and take your attention elsewhere. So I absolutely believe, and science has proven, that when you focus on something, you go towards it. But the thing I think lets people down in the law of attraction is that it doesn't ever talk about application. It kind of says you want the best partner in the world. Focus on it, think about it, imagine they're there, and they will turn up. And I'm like, well, not really. If you never leave the couch, how are they going to turn up? You see, if I want a new home, I can think about the home I want, I can imagine, but I also know I've got to go and look at it. I've got to go onto websites and look at homes and then go and view that home. If I wanted a new job, I can think about the new job, imagine the new job, and believe I can manifest it, but I also need to apply for that new job, go for interviews, put myself out there. Let's imagine you want the career of your dreams, or maybe you want to start your own business, and that's all good. And you can use the law of attraction to visualize the career of your dreams, to visualize someone funding your business, setting up your startup. And it's a great visualization. You can use vision boards, you can use meditation, you can use so many things to excite your imagination, to fire off those neurons that go, hey, I can do this, but you still have to take action. the best plan in the world may not work if you don't work too. You see, I had an idea to write a book, and I knew I was going to sit down and write a book, and I did sit down and write a book, but I had to also find an agent, speak to people. I was very lucky that as I was beginning to write my book, I went to a dinner party, sat next to someone, happened to be an agent, which was very useful. And then I started to tell one of my clients I was writing a book, and she said, you know, the best agent in town is one of your patients. I'm like, really? Oh yeah. So I contacted him. He came to my house. He ended up being my agent, but I also had to do work. I had to write that book. I had to have the confidence. It was an amazing book. And agents will tell you, will go, oh, hey, I could do a Harry Potter. I've written a book, here it is. And they go, actually, no, it's not quite right. Decide you are worth it. That is so important. It's one of the most, but not the most important step. Decide you're worth it, and then decide what you are going to do to get it. What are the steps you are going to take to make that law of attraction real? What are you going to do if you hit a roadblock? And the first thing you hear is no. So remember, you must take the action. You must be committed. You must be disciplined. You must have belief and faith and a very strong work ethic too, because the best plan in the world may not work if you don't work with it.